This podcast contains paid advertisements, but more on that later. Welcome to the O'Connor Bootstrap podcast, where I discuss how you can grow your business by the bootstraps. This applies to everyone with an entrepreneurial spirit. That includes bootstrappers just starting out, established business owners, and business leaders. My goal is to help you grow both personally and professionally. I'm your host, Isaiah O'Connor. Today's podcast comes to you from Audible.com. Stories that speak to you. Audible.com is the world's largest collection of audio content, such as books, podcasts, college lectures, radio plays, etc. It's an amazing site. It's an amazing app. I use it all the time, especially because I'm very busy and I don't have a lot of time to sit and read these days. So I listen to my books these days. And the book I personally recommend today is the book 48 Days to the Work You Love. It's very important to be able to fall in love with your job, with your work, and have a purpose in it. Because if you don't, you might become miserable, and this ties into today's podcast. And of course, you can go get a free copy of 48 Days to the Work You Love. Matter of fact, it was this book that I was listening to on Audible, working in a restaurant that was driving me crazy, that caused me to strike out and become an entrepreneur, and in a roundabout way, brought you this podcast. So you can go get a copy, 48 Days to the Work You Love, over at audible.com/bootstrap with a capital B. That's audible.com/bootstrap. And all you need to do is sign up for the free trial for their $14.95 a month. You get one book, 2 Audible originals, plus access to their entire listening library for the entire month free. And you get to keep the book and the Audible originals forever. They're yours forever. It's really a great deal. You can go check it out. Again, audible.com/bootstrap. Now, let's get into this. Last podcast, I talked about having a professional attitude and how if you let yourself slip into a bad attitude or a bit of an elitist attitude, it can harm you and your business. There's another type of bad attitude that comes, and that's just an overall grumpy attitude, just an overall bad attitude that can, again, lead to your destruction. And again, the worst boss I've ever had, I've talked about this guy a couple of times. He had a bad attitude at work. He was hard to explain, but he was generally unpleasant to be around. He had good days. He had bad days, but when he had a bad day, it was really, really bad. And it destroyed him, it destroyed his business, he lost everything. Not good. Now, this is the point of today's subject. Are you happy with what you are doing? Are you in the right place? I've talked about this before, but the difference is sometimes, even if you're a business owner, you may not be happy with being in that business. And because of that, you sabotage yourself by having a bad attitude. A bad attitude drives away employees, drives away customers, and can sink your business. It can really ruin your day. And if you find yourself completely having a bad attitude, dreading going to work, dreading operating your business, dreading being the leader that you need to be, you need to maybe stop and ask, why am I so incredibly miserable here? What is the problem? Now, this other guy I was talking about, he wound up also having a substance abuse problem to add to everything, which did not help. But again, I think a good part of that was being stressed out about the job and not being able to handle it. Now, he was a business owner. He owned his business. But he was not a bootstrapper. This was not his business. It was his father's business that he was running. he had wanted to do other things with his life, but due to a series of circumstances, he wound up being forced to run his dad's place instead of his place. And of course, he grew up in that place. He knew how to run it. He knew what to do, but he didn't like it. It wasn't who he really was. And so I believe that contributed to his bad attitude about where he was. And it wasn't just oh, well, I worked here with my dad since I was little and I really hate it, but maybe I can learn to like it. It was this is so not me, so opposed to everything I am that it's driving me absolutely insane being here. And he took it because he felt he had no other choice. And so he took the job, which I think helped lead to his ruin. And I do feel sorry for the guy. And I mentioned him not so much to just rip on the guy. It's because he's a good example of the things that can go wrong when you're working in a field that is the polar opposite of who you should be. And some of the bad choices. He's a great bad example, as it were. And I do understand the guy had a rough time. He had a rough life growing up, and there was several reasons behind his behavior. So I'm not going to give him a straight pass, but again, I'm not saying he was the worst person on the planet. But the bad attitude that he picked up was in large part to him not doing what he really loved. And if he had stepped back and maybe sold the business or found somebody to run the business so he could go do something else, he might have had a much better outcome than trying to run everything himself and hating it. So you got to check your attitude and see if it's because you're in the wrong place. And I've titled this episode, A Bad Fit Equals a Bad Attitude. Not always, but often. And I've seen it a lot of times. A lot of times I've seen people, employees, coworkers, etc., that come into a place and they're a bad fit for the place. They've come on because their parents want them to, or their family expected them to, or different types of peer pressure decided that they should, and so they join and they come on board and they have a bad attitude and they don't last. But the bad attitude's not just a personal thing. It's not just them, but it's because they chose to do something based on what other people wanted for them and not necessarily what they wanted for themselves. Or because of circumstances, they wound up landing in a place they really hated to be. And in that book, 48 Days to the Work You Love, he addresses this very clearly. There's a story right in the beginning about a surgeon who was hating life, struggling with a drug addiction, really, really miserable, at his wit's end, and come to find out, his mom was a surgeon, his dad was a surgeon, and so he was a surgeon, but he just wanted to be a truck driver. And because he became a surgeon, because his mom and dad were a surgeon, he was miserable with his life and was being extremely self-destructive. But when he realized he wanted to be a truck driver, and he got a job driving a truck during the week, and ever so often work a couple of weekend shifts to make the money he needed, he was happy, and he got rid of his drug addiction, and he was a great guy afterwards, because he was miserable where he was. So, here's a question for you guys out there today. When you're looking at your career, at your job, at your bootstrap business, are you happy with your decision? Now, I'm not talking about the stress that comes along with the honeymoon phase is over and you have to work hard and you struggle and COVID hits and things are rough. And it's miserable right now because it's just been a rough year for a lot of people. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Are you overall dissatisfied with where you are? Not because you're not making enough money, although that could be a part of it, but because you just are miserable with what you do. You find no joy in what you do, and that you can't find joy in what you do. Sometimes you can find joy in something that's boring to you or something that doesn't really excite you, but you can choose to become passionate about your work as long as it doesn't rub completely against who you are. If it's 180 degrees against you, pushing back, you're not going to be able to find joy or peace or happiness in that job, no matter what. So if you're constantly grumpy, if you're snapping at your customers, at your clients, if you're short with your suppliers, if you're overall miserable and treating other people badly and you're not having a professional attitude, maybe it's because you're doing something you really don't want to do. Now, if you're a bootstrapper and you had a great idea and you started running with it, and you realize, it's not as fun as I liked, maybe you need to stop, take a step back, and try to figure out what drove you to do what you're doing in the first place. And if you can regain that first excitement, realize the first reason why you started, and if it's something that is really you, then great. Perhaps, though, you started a business because you felt pressure to start a business. Maybe you grew up with parents that were entrepreneurs. Maybe you grew up with people that all went off and started their own business, and so you did too, and you just picked some random thing and you started your own business. And it's just not working for you, and you're just miserable because you never really wanted to run your own business, but someone else told you should, so you did. And so you went off and you started bootstrapping your own business because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Wrong. I'm a bootstrapper. I'm an entrepreneur. I love encouraging people to become entrepreneurs and bootstrappers. But everyone can't be an entrepreneur. Everyone can't be a bootstrapper. It's not in everyone to do. And that's fine. I don't think being a bootstrapper is any more important or any more valid than a person who's working at a factory making jelly beans or operating some sort of heavy lifting equipment. We need people to do those. And if that's what you love, go do it. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. Do I like people to be entrepreneurs? Oh yeah, sure, you betcha. But the real key is doing something that you can become passionate about, something you can get excited about. Because if you don't, you'll just continually have a bad attitude and it will just get worse and it'll be a lot harder to do. And personal experience, personal attitude check myself, that's the reason why I really don't want to work ever again, if I can avoid it, as a cook in a restaurant. It's highly stressful. It's really hard to work, very low pay. Unless you're a master trained chef, but even then, you still don't make a huge amount of money. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of stress, and not a lot of pay. And even though I like to cook, I like to make food for my friends and family, doing it as a job takes all the joy out of it for me, and it's nearly impossible for me to get excited and become passionate about being a cook at a restaurant, especially a restaurant where they just have set recipes and you just do what the boss tells you to make. That is a job that is miserable for myself. Absolutely horrible. And I find when I'm in that job, and the last few times I've worked as a cook, out of desperation, because it was the only jobs I could get at the time, turns out I was getting more and more grumpy, more and more stressed, had to watch myself getting more and more of a bad attitude towards the boss, towards the co-workers, and I didn't like who I was becoming with that. Sure, I could do it. Not every day was horrible, but my overall attitude was going downhill with working the job because I was miserable at doing it. And when you're miserable doing something, your attitude is hard to keep up. I was never the most happy guy there. I mean, I'm always usually the happy guy, the guy who's bubbling and smiling through stuff. But when you put me in a kitchen to work, I can get really grumpy really quickly. And even snap at people and yell at people. And it's out of character for me to do that in general. But you put me in a position like working at a restaurant, and it's too much for me. I can't stand it. It's too hard. I don't have any passion for it. And I get a really bad attitude. And I have to fight to keep a good attitude. But once I've left, I'd never want to go back. My attitude has never gotten that bad with other people before. Get me out of the restaurant, I'm a much better guy. So, yeah, if you find you're having a bad attitude, you're grumpy, everything else, take a look. Maybe you're just doing the wrong thing. Now, if you do find yourself in a spot and you realize it's the job that's driving you crazy, don't just say, "Goodbye, boss. See ya," and walk out the door. Sure, you can do that if you feel like it. Not the best plan. Make a plan before you leave. Find another job. That book again, 48 Days to the Work You Love. Great book. Try to figure out what you want to do, what you can do, where you can go. Will it be becoming a bootstrapper? Will it be quitting your bootstrapping business, selling it, and going and working for someone else? But make a plan first so that when you do make the change, you're not walking off and go, "Oh crap, now I decided to be an entrepreneur. I have no income. I just walked off the job and now I have to pay the bills. Oh crap." You need a plan. Don't get too worked up. Don't get too excited. Have a plan. Go out. Get another job. Start your business. Start small. Start on the side. And you'll work your way through it. And that's another thing. Sometimes if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel and you know you're about to make that transition, it helps your attitude at your current position last at a higher level as you go. Anyway, you have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. If you found value in this content, please leave a comment and give us a 5-star rating on whichever podcast platform you use. We're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, and most other podcast platforms. If you would like to support us, you can check out our sponsor links, or if you'd like to support us directly, you can donate or join our membership program at buymeacoffee.com/bootstrap. Of course, it really helps when you share these podcasts with your friends as well. If you'd like to interact with me and other bootstrappers and leaders, you can join us over at our O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast Facebook group. You have been listening to the O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast, an Atheoz Business Solutions podcast. For a companion podcast, the Atheoz Business Podcast, which is hosted by Jason St. Clair, past episodes and related blogs, please check out our website at www.atheoz.com, which is at www.atheoz.com or theoz.com. Until next time, I have been your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, Isaiah O'Connor.